Why don't you share something that about?
Okay. Can you share about your Jesus story? Because that's a nice end to it, and then I can go from there.
What Jesus story?
The Jesus story with angels, dear. That Jesus is an angel. I think they can hear me, though. Yeah.
Oh.
That Jesus is an angel. I love your Jesus angel story.
I do. You do.
I do. I can tell it, but you tell it better. It's your story.
But I don't remember it.
That Jesus, that the reason anybody curious, like why the heck do we talk about angels so much? Anybody curious anymore still? Yeah? So I love Michael's answer to it, but he's clearly going to let me tell it, apparently. But if it comes back to you, please jump in.
Well,
excellent.
I'll say this.
Please.
When the reference of Lucifer as Jesus' elder brother is a reflection that what does angel really mean? Well, angel is messenger. So the angels are messengers of God's intention. And if we look at the Christ action, and we can almost call it the Christ opportunity, is really as an upgrade to this creation and the plan of progression in this creation about how progression would take place. So that God created all that is manifest, all that is tangibility, and then God individuated itself to have an experience of that manifestation. And so God's intention in all this was to experience all that God had created and to learn about creating and learn about itself and its creation. But in the Luciferian plan, that got lost somewhere as the emphasis became set all about balance and the karmic principle of cause and effect. And in the process, the planning out of progression into this condition for the souls and for other evolving, awakening, learning consciousness was being limited very much by the requirement of having to balance everything out. And so another opportunity or a remediation. I like to think it's like they put a patch on the program, the computer, and say, well, we're going to fix this. And so the Christ action comes forward then as this refocusing on God's intent in the whole action, which was the learning. God set this all up to learn about itself. And so the Christ opportunity comes forward with the focus shifts from the need for balance to the purpose of learning. And as long as the learning is taking place, that opens the door for grace. And with it, the power of forgiveness. If we take the story in the Bible of the lady who's accused of adultery and they're going to stone her and they bring her before Jesus. And she, could we keep that off? Thanks. She's accused of adultery, and he says, well, let he who is among you that is without sin cast the first stone, and so nobody does. I always think it's interesting that he also doesn't cast a stone. And then when he kind of looks up, he says, woman, where are your accusers? And she said, they've all left. And he says, neither do I accuse you. And he says, go and sin no more. Well, to sin is to miss the mark, which is, in a sense, it's an archery term, which means you've missed. You made a mistake. So, to me, what he's really saying there is learn from this. Don't make the same mistake. It's forgiven. And that embodies his principle. So, getting back to the angelic thing, the angelic formed, sometimes called Lucifer here, that was an overseeing consciousness into the action of how this was playing out in creation. Another messenger out of God was brought forward. And that messenger, we could say then, is a great angelic force, or angelic purpose. It comes as another messenger of God. And so, if we understand the angels as instruments of God's intent, messengers of God's intent, servants of God's intent, then we realize everything we want to do and everything we want to transpire in our lives is to also be in alignment with God's intent and to be an instrument of God's intent. We don't aspire to be angels as angels are in their service action, but we also recognize that they're an essential part of the whole dance, and that we work with them, we co-create with them. When Jesus was taken before Pilate, and there was, he makes a statement, according to the Bible, that if I were but to say the word, legions of angels would appear and stop this. But he doesn't do it because this is the Father's will that he's doing. So he's given over to the Father's will, and yet who's he calling on? He's calling on the angels. So we really do want to work with the angels. We don't want to make a movement into the angelic realm or the angelic experience our goal, because we're trying to go into the divine remembrance, to know ourselves as God, to know ourselves as in the true nature of our Creator and who we are and who we've always been. And as we do that, it's like we're fulfilling the highest intent of God for our experience, our expression, our manifestation. So there's a lot of thought about, well, don't focus on the angels because it could be a distraction. But it's only a distraction if we, like anything else, if we utilize it the way it's meant to be utilized, it's a wonderful thing. It's like when we do our meditation process. If we are chanting and we move up to other levels of consciousness, if we move before that which has rulership or governorship of a certain dimension of reality, let's say we come before what we could think of as a God, or that which has control or management of the mental realm of existence. That's such a glorious, extraordinary consciousness. And it is in our progression to come to know that consciousness. And in a sense, to truly know it, we know ourselves also as one with it. Meaning we experience that this I am also. Yet, if we were to then stop there, we'd have turned that which was a stepping stone of our remembrance into an obstacle. to remembrance. So we don't do that. We have that and we go on into the greater remembrance. And so the same thing would apply then with the work with the angels. They're a great tool, and they're not the end game. They're also progressing to the end game. And so all that is in the pretense of individuation is becoming undone into that which is only God. But along the way, there is this dance we do. And so I don't know if that was what she was looking for. It's a little more complicated, but it kind of explains that. So whenever people want to poo-poo the angels, it says, well, just work with that. Well, no, the angels are alignment to the Christ and to the purpose of that action very much. So, with that, why don't you tell us more about Angelus?
Well, I confess I was hanging out with with some great archangels, and one in particular, so I didn't really hear what you said. So if I repeat what he said, forgive me, please.
I didn't hear what he said either.
Excellent.
I just said it.
Okay. So I heard a little bit, though. Someone is receiving a visitation of one as we speak. I would say this. When people say to me, well, why work with the angelic? I say, don't work with the angelic. Work with the great archangelic. And by that, and Michael was actually the one who coined the term great archangelic. And those are, to give you an idea, there's, yes, VU. There are whatever number is, Googleplex of angels, because the angels we're here first. We are the new kids on the block, and we're an experiment, right? You should know it feels like an experiment a lot of times, right? So there's, gazillions of trillions upon trillions of angels. There's, the number shifts a bit, but as far as I've seen, certainly less than 50 and probably less than 40 great archangels. So they are very high, pristine beings. And yes, I did hear Michael say they're progressing to the end game. Yes, but the great archangels are, well, certainly much further, much closer to that than certainly I am. I'll just speak for myself. I have, people often will come to see me, well, how do I connect to the angelic? And that's pretty easy. I almost feel like I'm cheating because that's so easy. That's kind of what I do. But be like someone going to Michael and saying, can you clear me of, this person? But to me, so I do work with the angelic a lot, but often I don't say anything. Because often what happens is we'll be working with a past life or something where it would take the person to integrate. It might take them this long, to integrate the movement from that. And a great archangel will come in and just compress that. And boom, they're in it and they're off, and they don't have to go through 6 months or whatever of integrating that learning. See, that, and you go, well, what's in it for them? Well, one, service. But two, that's how they extrude into this level. We've talked about the angels are born in absolute, complete surrender, one with God's will. We are born in co-creatorship, conscious choice. They evolve, when they get to be around archangelic, they evolve to co-creatorship. We evolve as we get into those, many, many, many lifetimes into that absolute surrender, where it's like, thy will, Lord. And that absolute oneness with God's intention. So we evolve to where they are born, and they evolve to where we are born. So same lesson, but coming at it from a different way. And I think I shared with you that I did confirm with JR, was just on fire with this. I had to go confirm with him that as I see the angelic and the human coming into one. He said, yes, that's accurate. And I said it a different way, and he verified it again. And before I went up to him, he was like this. And I just stood in front of him, and he was like, he came wide awake. And this was in the latter days where Jared was more out. And so to me, there's a greater purposefulness to working with the great archangelic than just, oh, it is wonderful to hang out with archangels. It's blissful. Until you get used to it, and then you got to go higher. Just like when you evolve into the spirit. So it's not just about, going to Italy because Italy's beautiful. It's like going to Italy to see the Pope. Do you know there's a purposefulness to it? We've talked a bit about connecting in with a particular. You've heard us do that in the class, and often Michael will say there's an angel with you, and then we'll talk about how does that assist you. You don't need us for that. You can do that anytime you want. A few tips, if you will. Give yourself the benefit of a doubt. They are spiritual beings. They don't come in on physical sensing. So people will sometimes, and by the way, there's a lot of them in the room. When we first started talking about it, I asked them to open it up, and that's when if you notice, I started having kriyas. So a lot of them came into the room, but with that came several great archangels. So if you want to be aware of the angelic, there's a portal, if you will, opened up right now. But you sense them with spiritual sense. And people will say to me, well, I don't see angels. I don't see, wings and fat babies and, And I say, I don't either. If I see a form, I know they're doing it to make me more comfortable, or often it's symbolic. Like, for example, if I see, often they'll give me, because I've already shared with you, I see things symbolically and then I interpret it. So often they'll show me, a rod and a staff or something like that, and I know it's symbolic. They don't have form like we have. So you're probably already aware of the angelic. You're just not giving yourself the benefit of a doubt. You sense them with spiritual sensing. Very subtle, but like truth, comes in a way that you, when you go into your heart of hearts, don't deny. You might experience, as you've seen sometimes people have done in these classes, where they'll start to have kriyas or will seem a little dramatic or that kind of thing. Often that's when they're bridging into the angelic more and bringing that into this level and this level into that. And you go, well, what's the value of that? It stretches you out so that you drop the identity of this body, this conditioning, this past, and you take up that identity, which is no identity. Okay? It takes you out of your own identity into an expanded identity and into whatever gifts that particular being has for you.